Alright everyone, we start off today of course talking about the student loan grift and the sensible alternative, which is even being mentioned by fucking CNN at this point. The easiest thing to do is just bring back bankruptcy proceedings for student loan debt. Now what happened under, I think it was Bush actually, it might have been the early Obama administration. I can't quite recall which of those failed administrations was more centrally responsible for this. The idea of bankruptcy proceedings is that there is no feasible way, and you can prove this before a court, no feasible way that you're ever going to be able to pay back a certain kind of debt, credit card debt, etc., etc. And so in those proceedings, your assets by and large are liquidated. They're sold off to cover whatever proportion of the debt they're capable of. There are various settlements that can be made. Your primary residence typically is sheltered. I think that there's a cap on the value of that, if I remember correctly, and then you can go back to square one. Nobody wants to go through bankruptcy proceedings for multiple reasons. You are liquidating all of your other assets, so you're starting at zero effectively. But when you're starting, which would you rather do if you're like really sunk in on debt? You went to college, you got $50,000 in debt, you get your degree, or maybe not, and now, you figure, hey, I'm going to enter the job market. At the very least, I've got a degree. I've got a higher likelihood of finding something that's fairly decent, and then I can pay off the loans over time. And then that doesn't happen. The economy gets flattened like it did in the 2000s, of course, with the housing bubble bursting and all of the other problems, bank bailouts, the government spending lots of funny money propping up mega corporations under Bush-Obama. You don't have that job. You're flipping burgers. No reasonable person would suspect, after years of attempting to find a better job, etc., etc., trying to dig your way out, if at some point the amount of debt causes, through interest, the capital, the principal balance, and the monthly payments to be onerously high, and you can show a judge, hey, I'm not capable of paying this off. There's no reason to believe I'm ever going to be able to pay this off. I need bankruptcy. In the old days, for student loan debt, you could file bankruptcy proceedings. And it was as simple as for credit cards and other forms of debt. There's litigation, etc. You're covering a lot of costs, but you have a possibility. There's a chance to redeem your fiscal situation. Now, you're like, oh my God, I'm 40 years old and I got $100,000 in debt and I'm still working double shift at Wendy's. Do you expect the debt to go away? No, it'll just keep accruing and accruing and accruing, so let's get bankruptcy going. As of more recently, that becomes impossible for most people. It is possible to trigger bankruptcy proceedings for student loans, but it's very difficult. It's held to an entirely different standard from other forms of debt. What we should do is nix the student loan debt forgiveness grift, which will cost people who never went to college, especially from the lower classes, I would note, through inflation partially. And the White House can't even answer how it's going to pay for this hundreds of billions of dollars handout anyway. People who already paid off their student loans, they did what they're supposed to do. They did manage to succeed, etc., etc. They're having to foot the bill under Biden's proposal for tens of millions of people to receive, in many cases, partial debt forgiveness that just kicks the can down the road anyway. It doesn't tackle tuition prices. It doesn't tackle the bankruptcy proceeding aspect of it. What we should do, therefore, is twofold. Restore student loan bankruptcy proceedings to the proper working order they were at anyway for 100 years. It worked. It wasn't a problem. And secondly, get government out of subsidizing the higher educational system to begin with. Now, leftoids will never support that. This article certainly doesn't mention that. But it should be done, because there's a reason why the student loan amount keeps rising and rising, why the cost of tuition keeps skyrocketing. You give free money, again, at taxpayer expense, to a university that's already sitting in many cases on a multi-billion-dollar endowment. They've got plenty of money. Instead of lowering the cost, they actually raise the cost. You're giving students more debt relief on the front end, and they gobble up that money, and they build another stadium. They build another student center, etc., etc. That's the other aspect of it. Within this article, they're talking about bringing back the bankruptcy proceedings, but they never get to the true source of the problem. That's just a symptom as well. It's a symptom of a dirty system that wants people in huge amounts of debt because then it can extract more and more wealth from them. It's very lucrative. The government loves it. They like robbing people of their money. Probably if they did fix this, they would just cause a problem elsewhere, and they would be gobbling up money on the backs of some other group of people. Automotive loans, mortgages, whatever it happens to be. They'd love to price people out of their homes and into pods. By the way, they're actively attempting to do this already in a number of states and principalities in the United States. You should nix the Grift, which is basically vote buying. Any common sense Democrat should vote against this too. And there are, by the way, rumblings that some House and Senate Democrats are not actually on board with the deal that Biden and others have concocted, because they happen to be vulnerable and they're in areas that are not quite so fiscally far left as like AOC. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out anyway when it's fought against in court and almost inevitably injuncted as unconstitutional. Barring actual legislation that probably can't make it through the Senate. And you're running out of time to use the reconciliation switcheroo, by the way. It's almost September, so I don't know what the Democrats are sitting on their asses for. At the very least, ram it through and ingratiate yourselves to the leftoids. You don't have to worry about the inflation showing up until after the midterms, so what the fuck do you have to lose, I suppose. Anyway, again, link in the description, archived, of course, so you can read this for yourself. The bankruptcy proceedings aspect would be good. It's better than the student loan grift. My proposal goes further, which is get the government out entirely of the higher educational system. Or make the aid that you're giving conditional to actually lower the cost per student. Do it front end instead of doing a bailout that in a couple of years you'll have the same amount of student loan debt anyway. The $10K that you're giving to people is a drop in the bucket compared to the average tuition per year anyway. So the problem is kicked down the road by about a year. That's what this will accomplish. Some people who already have debt will do well. Several tens of millions of people will effectively have their remaining debt wiped out. That's wonderful for them. But in some cases, you've got someone, because the cap is so high, $125K per year, you have someone who has less than $10K of debt. They are doing well. They're making $90K a year, and they're still getting their debt wiped out, even though they can't claim that they need that. They should be capable of making the debt payments on that small a total if they're making near six figures. It should be feasible for them to do that in a fairly short order. Hell, maybe they can even one-time it with what they've got in the fucking bank account. They should be capable of it. I think that I technically qualify for this, and I got Pell, so I guess in my case it's $20K. I don't need student loan debt forgiveness. I've got enough income so I can cover it. I don't need the fucking taxpayers to do it for me. People who never went to college, meanwhile, are the ones mainly that get screwed. They never even took out debt, but in some cases they got a decent job. Now they're going to be paying $2,500, $3,000 a person in various inflation and or taxation for people who got women's study degree and doesn't have a job and is incapable of getting one because they got a shitty degree. Another thing that we should address is this hyper-focus on everyone needing to go to college in the first place. I can remember in the 2000s going to like trade school or something like that, or even like a community college thing where you're paying front end, you're not getting the debt, you're getting your associates or whatever in business or something, was frowned upon. The idea was that if you were at least in the top quarter of your graduating class, you must absolutely go to the best school that you can possibly go to and rack up lots of debt, because you're the creme de la creme, and certainly you're going to be the next eminent rocket scientist or something. We started telling people to go and get liberal arts degrees that barely prepare them for anything meaningful, outside of being a paper pusher, working in a cubicle and making $10K more a year than the janitor or something like that, instead of making actually more money by going full Mike Rowe and going off and becoming a plumber. We now have a shortage of many of the blue-collar jobs that are out there. You know how much an oil rig worker makes? It's more than the nerd that decided they graduate in the second quarter of their class, but they went to a state college and they got a liberal arts degree and a shit ton of debt. Meanwhile, the blue-collar worker gets double screwed because maybe they took out a loan in order to finance a truck so that they could get to their work jobs. They're not getting any debt relief. People with other forms of debt, they continue to get screwed. It's just this one particular kind. The government is so worried about student loan debt crushing the youth Then why did you get rid of the bankruptcy proceedings for these people? That was your idea. It was the government that did that. So don't cry me crocodile tears and pretend to care about all the college kids and stuff. Some of them are responsible for their own debt. They got themselves into a mess. And for everyone else, it's all well and good. That's perfectly fine. Someone who, through no fault of their own, really just got handed a raw deal in life, but then you're giving a raw deal to millions of other people, and it's just absolutely fucking bogus. That's about all. Peace out.